Mr. Briggs?
What is it, Marge?
I don't know. Mr. Briggs, I think I ought to resign.
Resign? What are you talking about? What happened? What is it, Marge?
Mr. Briggs, I've just been ordered to go over to Mr. Staples as his new secretary.
Temporarily?
No, I don't think so.
Who gave this order?
Miss Lanier.
When?
About 5 minutes ago. I'm supposed to break in your new secretary.
They've picked a new secretary for me?
Yes, I think so.
It's out of the question for you to resign, Marge, to even think of resigning. You're a fine, wonderful woman and a great secretary. That's the reason they want you over with Staples. He'll need someone like you because he's new here and they want him to get into harness fast. Who can tell, Marge? One of these days, that stomach of mine, pretty perverse organ, and I'm tired. You know, as it must to all men.
Mr. Briggs?
Have you any idea who your successor is?
Yes, they've chosen Sylvia Trammell.
Miss Trammell. It is so ordained. So be it.
She's new, but she's supposed to be very good at dictation.
Well, we'll give her a chance to prove it.
Mr. Briggs, if I could only tell you what this job has meant to me, what working with you has meant to me.
All right, kid. Wash up, get your money, and get out of here. And give Mr. Staples all the best you've got in you. I know you will. That's the only way you operate. I like the guy. I have a feeling he's going to carve out a career around here.
Yes, sir. Everybody seems to think so.
I'm sorry to keep you waiting, gentlemen. Mr. Ramsey will be with us in a moment.
I'll see you. Been away, have you? Good to see you. Oh, sorry, Fred. I was held up for a few minutes.
See you later, Fred.
Now, where are we going to sit you? Oh, here's an empty chair. I guess you can sit right here.
Mr. Staples, will you sit over there, please? Right next to Mr. Van Deventer. One down for Mr. Ramsey, please.
Welcome back, Bill. Feeling better?
Much, thank you. A little stomach.
Good. I'm glad it's cleared up.
John, don't forget that contract. Can you get it through tomorrow?
I think so. I have the preliminary stand over your office.
First, gentlemen, I'd like you to look over the Mimeo sheet on top. Haverford Mutual had some doctors look into the matter of executive diets. Their findings showed incredible deficiencies. They've gotten up some food tables. I've had them mimeoed. I'd like you to look them over. As you know, it's been my feeling that a healthy executive is an efficient one. I think it not amiss now to introduce the newest member of our team, Mr. Fred Staples. He's from Mansfield, Ohio. As you all know, he was general manager of Queen City Tool and Die until we took it over. His record there was a brilliant one. He's a production engineer by training, an industrial relations man by instinct. I expect good things from him. Oh, you've probably met everyone, but just for the record, reading from left to right, Mr. Jameson, head of purchasing.
Yeah, we met.
Mr. Granigan, controller.
Staples?
Mr. Gordon, head of sales.
How are you?
Mr. Latham, head of service. Mr. Portier, chief of operations.
Yes, nice to know you.
And Mr. Van Deventer, chief engineer.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Pleasure.
Oh, and of course you've met Mr. Briggs,
Oh, yes.
who is our vice president, assistant general manager, in charge of everything that everybody else forgets to be in charge of. Now, gentlemen, you all have before you a copy of the Williamston plant purchase prospectus. Mr. Jameson, did you attach your supplements?
It's right there, Mr. Ramsey, page 17R, under process equipment.
And Mr. Granigan, the stock purchase plan I outlined, I have your comments here?
You do, Mr. Ramsey.
Good. Feasible, is it?
Very much so, in my opinion.
Good. Well, that about winds it up, unless there are any further points to be made.
I do think, Mr. Ramsey, if we could keep the transaction under wraps for a bit, at least during the preliminaries. You know what'll happen to the stock quotations if it leaks out that we've agreed to purchase.
I've arranged it this way. The stock quotation as of yesterday morning. You seem to be straining at the leash, Mr. Briggs, or am I mistaken?
You mentioned here that probable time of purchase would be sometime in June. Are the plants to be in receivership until then?
That seems to be what it says.
That means 6 months with improper maintenance of equipment.
Oh, I doubt it, Bill. I've had 2 of my best men out there for the last 6 weeks. Oh, we had a varying voltage problem, but that was taken care of. You know, maintenance-wise, I doubt if there'll be $1,000 worth of deterioration.
How about goodwill?
What about it?
The plant employs 900 men. That's half the working force of the village.
So?
So what do we do with these men? Cover them with cosmoline and put them away in a drawer until we get ready to resume production?
I thought your concern was for the plant.
And what good is the plant without the men? You chop a village payroll in half for 6 months and you might not have a plant because you might not have a village.
Mr. Briggs, if we may be permitted to disregard for the moment the considerations that you have brought up, what about the rest of the plan?
I'd say it was adequate.
Adequate. That, gentleman, is the kiss of death, believe me. I've known Mr. Briggs for a long time. When he says something is adequate, what he means is that it is entirely inadequate.
I must admit to feeling a concern over some 900 men suddenly deprived of a livelihood.
Mr. Briggs, if you would do me the goodness to look at what I consider to be a fairly elementary business principle. By putting 900 men out of work temporarily, we may ultimately employ twice that number in the same town. By cutting production costs as a result, we will then be able to compete more favorably in the market. Thus, we'll be able to sell more goods. We're not going to ruin that town, we're going to make it. I should think, Mr. Briggs, that after 30 years, you'd be able to think beyond the tongue-clucking stage and come up with something resembling an analytical point of view.
I was under the impression I'd given you a point of view.
I saw none. I perceived what amounts to a rather emotional little tidbit that was decidedly more charitable than cooperative and by no means thought through. I asked, I believe, for an objective view of a business venture. From you I got, and I seem constantly to be getting, a very negative response of any at all. Adequate, I believe you said. Well, Mr. Briggs, this little move will save us conservatively $500,000, which we'll be able to put back into the business. I must say you take a liberal view of adequacy.
I didn't intend to make a central issue out of this, but I did feel it important enough to air in this meeting.
Well, you have aired it in this meeting.
I think it's a good thing you did. But I think, Bill, we're pretty much of one mind about it now.
And we may assume the matter is closed now. Mr. Briggs. How about you, Mr. Staples? Do you have an opinion?
No. No, I think not, Mr. Ramsey.
Why not?
Well, frankly, it's a little out of my grasp at the moment. I don't know anything about the firm, its corporative setup, reasons for bankruptcy, or for that matter, its product. I'm afraid I'll have to pass.
Good answer. I respect thoughtful judgment, Mr. Staples. Congratulations. We'll adjourn now until 2 o'clock. I'm sorry we got started so late this morning, but I wanted this analysis mimeoed for your inspection. After lunch, we'll take up the Portland report, which you have before you. Mr. Granigan attended a stockholders' meeting there on Tuesday, and we'll begin our discussion with his report. That's all.